but I'm home. I flew out immediately after class last week and got home Saturday night. It was, yeah, it was not the most fun trip I'd ever had to Virginia, but hey, yeah, house is sold. That was the main goal. Sell Dad's house. Now he's like, I got money. I'll just buy another house. And we're like, oh, please, you can't do that. So, yeah. What? Hey, put your stuff back in your binder. You do that. Jack is not here. He has no reason to be here during your class. So he won't show up to lab time, but organize yourself because you're spread out all over. Is that your car? Oh. Did someone put the car there?
I don't know, but I remember being here since I came out.
It wasn't there this morning when I was cleaning up. It's going to become a thing if we don't put it somewhere. It's going to become a no. Do you have a good weekend, Colson? Good. You do anything fun? Not really. Just kind of hung out.
My weekend was windy. On the weekends, we usually get to do electronics until 12 o'clock. So we call them TV mornings. We do that every single weekend.
That's cool.
And in the afternoons, it's usually cleaning. So Saturday afternoon, I literally spent my entire afternoon in my room cleaning up my bed, which doesn't even look much better.
Hey, y'all. Doesn't even look much better. I made all this effort and it's no better.
And then Saturday, we went to Superior Place Systems where my grandpa works.
Yep.
And I got to drive the golf cart and the electric bike.
Oh, that's fun. That's fun. That's good stuff. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I got to see my best friend for a little bit. She came on Saturday and we took my daddy to lunch and then she drove me to the airport so I could fly home. The rest of the time I just spent with my sister and my brother-in-law and my dad. But it's been a rough couple weeks for my brother-in-law because his family's stuck in Kabul, Afghanistan and can't get out. So that's been not fun. And then his grandmother died on Saturday, as if that wasn't enough for his family, right? But hey, he's all right. He's doing his best to deal with it all, which he's doing better than I would do. Let's put it that way. I don't think I would deal so gracefully. All right, so it's we got 2 minutes. We'll give him 2 minutes. Call into Zoom. Who's calling into Zoom? Oh, it's suggesting I call into Zoom. I don't need to do that. If you have your lab and it's complete, you can go ahead and turn it in before you forget. You don't want to forget. So if you've got that. No, always keep your notes. What I'll do with so your binder work, your notes, you're going to want to always keep those, but there will be times when I will peek and see what's there. And that's when you're going to want to make sure that they're completed. But those notes are basically your study guide. And this is our last ecology lesson today. And then you'll have your ecology unit test over the week. So let's see, I gotta put this. So our recos were, we had a Darcy and we had a Claire and Miss Darcy was and you get Smarties for being a Smartie. There you go. This is Lily's over there, so she can put it back in her binder. And there you go. Thank you. That's a lab, Lily. I think it was just kind of laying around. I'm not sure. So today's lab you're turning in, last week's lab you're turning in today. And when we get to today's lab, I'll remind everybody, but when we get to today's lab, you're gonna have to wait till next week to see your results because we're gonna be growing some things. But you won't be turning that in, but you will be turning in some data. It's going to be kind of weird because the next couple of weeks, our labs are going to be the kind of thing where you're not going to get immediate data here. You're going to have to wait and see. And that's going to happen a lot in biology, a lot more than like in chemistry last year. We pretty much got our data same day. We run the experiment, we get all our data and the lab would be finished. But because we're dealing with life and biology, things have to grow. So that takes time. All right, so why don't we start? We're doing lesson 4. Humans and biosphere. So this is our last ecology lesson. Hooray. So here is your lesson 3 homework review. So we can kind of just go over it. I'll check your answers, obviously, in teacher ease, but just as a reminder. So what's one factor that does not limit the dispersal of a species? That would be wind. And
I was confused on that one. Is wind that limited for birds?
No, not really. I mean,
Or if it's heavy winds for small organisms that can get blown away? Oh, look, a bird's nest. Or at least make it hard.
oh, that's the big one, that's squirrel. That big one up in the tree, that's a squirrel nest. Oh, yeah. And it's fun to watch them.
Or like, couldn't it at least make it hard? I have one in my backyard.
I mean, yes, but when we're talking about limiting factors, it's not considered a limiting factor. So your desert biome is what has less than 25 centimeters of rain per year. Now this one right here was caught, a couple of you guys caught it. It was the wrong auto grading answer was checked, but your grassland is the one with your grass vegetation, and pretty much everybody checked the correct answer, but it was marked wrong because I had the wrong auto grading option checked. So that's a brownie point. Yeah, you guys will get that brownie point.
I was gonna go up and say, Mom, I promise you, I guarantee
Yeah.
I meant to click grass.
Well, and it gave you the correct answer and said the answer was grassland. And even if you clicked grassland, it said the correct answer was grassland, but it still marked it wrong. It's really easy for me to click the wrong auto grade. So I usually try and look at them multiple times, and sometimes I just miss one. So this was one I missed. So y'all caught it, and y'all will get a brownie point for that.
Yay.
And then our next one was your rainforest. That has 100 or more species of trees, 200 centimeters of rain, high temperatures. And there are, of course, some like your tropical rainforest is your high temperatures where your temperate's not quite as high. And then your deciduous forest, that's where we are, right? Cold winters, warm summers, 75 to 100 centimeters of rain yearly, just kind of right in the middle, sort of average. And then your taiga or your boreal forest, that's where you've got your long, severe winters. If you see the word severe winters, that's a clue, right? Severe, that is pretty severe when it's so cold that you have permafrost, right? Remember, the ground is permanently frozen year round in the northern part, in the taiga portion of that biome. And your tundra is the same, always frozen year round. Arctic climate. And then lastly, limiting factors. So your limiting factors are things like low food supply, weather conditions, lack of space. So these are things that limit how a population will grow. How much food is there? Is there too much rain or not enough rain? And that would also be things like low water too, which will be impacted by how much rain there is, and lack of space. All right, so let's look at our changing landscape. So this focuses a lot on the type of stuff we as humans do to change the landscape. So we have environmental issues is listed in your book. It says humans use resources for food and housing as well as produce waste. So what are some examples of resources we use for housing that come from the environment? Yeah. Wood. That's the first, easiest, most obvious one. What else? What else can you think of? What else do we use for housing that comes from the environment?
Rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Water.
Yeah, sometimes we use water. We certainly use it in the building process. And even stuff like steel. You know, there's steel in our houses. There's metal in our construction.
And glass.
Yeah, do you know how we make glass?
No clue.
Okay, so
sand.
yeah, sand. Yeah, silicate, which is bless you. Silicate, which is the stuff that makes up quartz and like clearer rocks. If we get nice pure silicate and we burn it and melt it down, we can end up with some glass in the end. Hey, what's up? You girls got room over there? Annabella is squashing. There you go. Thanks, gang. Perfect. So we are just on our first slide. You didn't miss a whole lot. So what are some examples of well, this is an easy one. What are some examples of food we get from the environment?
Apples.
Apples. Apples, that's a good one. What'd you say, Drew?
Everything.
Yeah, pretty much everything. Even the stuff we produce in factories, even our heavily manufactured food, all of the raw ingredients are going to come from the environment because all we do is eat organic things, and organic things are going to come from the environment. So what kind of waste do we produce? Well, yeah, there's that. There's the obvious human waste. Yeah, of course. All right. And what other kind of waste?
Everything we're dumping into the ocean.
Yes. Our trash, pollution. Yeah, of course. When you drive your car down the road, your car produces waste, right? And that's a human thing because we're driving it. It's not like the car is a product of the environment and part of the natural ecosystem. We've invented it. Now we're driving it. And now it's putting out like carbon monoxide and usually some degree of soot. Huh?
Certain trees can never be happy.
Certain trees could never be happier. Well, it depends. Yeah. So, and then obviously our factories and stuff, like Lewis was saying, pollution, and especially certain types of waste from factories, like the stuff that puts the soot and the nastiness into the air that you can actually see with your eyes. That's more obvious. And then there's also the stuff that's less obvious that we don't see. And then there's the chemicals that, get dumped into the rivers and streams and oceans. How about farming? We put fertilizer down. What happened with your algae? Yeah, what happened? It grew a lot. Yeah. And obviously if you put a lot of fertilizer down on farmland and that runoff gets into a stream, which gets into a pond, you can affect that whole ecosystem. All right. So we use resources. So here's an example. That's a logging truck, right? So we use resources from our environment. One example would be wood. That's probably the most obvious when you think about it. You look outside and go, well, yeah, I mean, if I were a pioneer and I moved here and I needed to build a house, the easiest thing to do would be to chop down some trees and build a log cabin or something. Far easier than trying to dig up enough rocks to make a little rock house. Maybe eventually you'd get there, but you'd probably start with the wood. Population. Okay. So yes, they're too cute. Let me tell you what, I found the cutest critters for this slideshow. I'm totally in love with some of these slides. I tried to make it all autumn themed because I'm over summer. I'm ready for autumn. So we have all these nice autumn themed slides here and autumn themed colors and leaves. I'm like, I'm ready for fall. It's almost September. So I know, right? So population, obviously, if we're using resources, that's going to impact the population because we talked about limiting factors. So one of them is space, right? And one of them is that would be habitat. That would involve habitat. So if this forest here that we're getting all these trees out of, right, is a home to these raccoons, we've potentially taken their home away. Now, some of them are going to find another home pretty quickly, especially if they're very mobile animals, and some are not. And that will be the end of them. They'll die out.
Well, we give them trash.
Have you ever heard the nickname, hush, you ever heard the nickname trash panda for raccoons, right? They call them trash pandas because they get in the trash and they eat it. But that's not what they're evolved to do. They're not evolved to eat human trash. It's just we've dumped our waste somewhere where they can get to it, and our waste is something they can eat, and it's easily accessible to them, so they're going to go for it.
On the as you enter a neighborhood, on the right, they're building another neighborhood.
I've watched that.
And I heard that they had killed a lot of animals by taking away their homes.
Yeah, that'll happen. And if not too far from your house, on Ronald Reagan Parkway, they have just started construction there on a new, I believe it's going to be like a shopping center, storage area, a bunch of stuff. I'm not even sure. Maybe it's more houses, a bunch of different stuff's going in there. But remember when last week we talked about succession and how certain things move in first? Well, it's really obvious if you drive by now because they've taken out all the hardwoods in the forest area. They're removing them all so that they can start doing whatever leveling or landscaping they intend to do. But along the edge of the road are all of these immature pine trees that are maybe 10 to 20 feet tall. And that's because when they built the road, they probably had to dig out wider than the road for construction and whatnot. And then they just left that area on the side of the road alone and it started growing back. So it was never at its primary point because the ground was never down to rock. But with all that soil turned over and trees gone, obviously grasses and weeds came in and then those little pine trees came back. But if you drive down Ronald Reagan anytime the next week or two before they take those little pine trees out, which I'm sure they're going, you can clearly see that there's some earlier succession and then that the more mature forest on the other side that never got touched before is gone now. So then also pollution. This is one of the things. So Darcy mentioned this and Lewis mentioned this. So if you are in a beautiful park like this beautiful, looks like a beautiful little waterfall park or something, and then there's a pile of junk on the side. So that junk can get there many ways. Sometimes people toss it out their car windows and water and wind transport it. Sometimes people literally throw their trash directly in the water because that's just what they do.
One day I went to my best friend Jack's backyard to walk to his other friends so we could get her to come play.
Yeah.
And it was perfectly clean. It was beautiful. When I came back next week, I had to watch my steps so I wouldn't step on broken glass.
Somebody throw a whole bunch there?
Yeah, Jack said they had a party over at the other house.
So I've been out, anybody ever go out on Lake Lanier? Get a boat and go out on Lake Lanier? So a couple years ago, my best friend was visiting and we had a pontoon boat because you can drive those up onto the sand and kind of beach it. That's fun about them. Like you can't do it with a speedboat, but you can beach a pontoon and then hop out. So we found this little island. What do we call it, Drew? It was like a half moon shaped island.
We called it
Stay, because their last name is Faye and ours is Start. So we were like, oh, it's Stay Island. We'll just mash that together. We'll just stay here for a couple hours. We were just joking around. My best friend and I were playing rock bass on the radio on the boat and we were dancing around and kids had jumped out in the water. It was fun. But this little crescent shaped, like a little sickle moon shaped island, right? We were in the little cove part, like the island was shaped like this and we were kind of down here in the middle. And we got out and started walking around on the island and the island was full of, like you were saying, little spots where people had stopped and had a party, where they had just left all their trash behind. Like there was clearly a little fire pit, there was some ashes and all their beer cans and soda cans and food packaging, and they just left it. And leaving that there is not what you're supposed to do. They say with nature, you know what they say about when you go in the woods, you ever see the little signs? Have you seen it?
Leave only footprints.
Is that what you're gonna say?
Leave over only.
Yeah. Take only pictures, leave only footprints, leave it as you found it. What were you gonna say?
So in my neighborhood, in the canoe, near my hotel,
Yeah.
there's we have like a lot of deer and stuff. So whenever like we go on just like random islands, like kind of like the on. There's one where there was a bunch of eagles, and my favorite one calls it Eagle Island.
Oh wow.
There's a bunch of other places.
That's cool.
So we went on Eagle Island and we just saw like a bunch of trash there. We were like, how did it get here? It's literally in the middle of the lake.
And that's frustrating. It's really frustrating. And that happens down, you know, at the river too.
And they don't let you like since it's the only eagles are there, people think that they can like keep it a secret.
Yeah.
Like having their stuff there, because if you leave it over where the mainland basically where we all live,
people would find it and So there are some things that we put into the environment as pollution that are not going to stay very long, the things we call biodegradable. If you leave a piece of paper or if you drop a tissue out of your pocket when you're walking through the woods, that tissue is going to be there a couple weeks and then it's mostly going to disintegrate and it'll soon become a part of the environment because it's organic, right? I mean, it's made of trees, essentially, if you trace it back far enough. A tissue came from trees because it's a kind of paper. Usually there's other stuff in tissues too. They put like cotton fibers and things in there to make them stronger and all that. And they put lotion in them these days and whatnot, antibacterial lotion, whatever the heck. So yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff though, yeah, it will eventually become a part of the environment. But if you leave a Coke can in the woods or a bottle in the woods, a glass bottle or a plastic bottle, that stuff is not going to become a part of, it's not going to disintegrate and become a part of the environment anytime soon. Yeah, that's true. Now animals may decide to live in it. Like if you've ever, what was it? There was some kind of shelter like that in the Secret of Nim book. I can't remember what it was, but they lived in some like a can or something that was left. And yeah, some animals will, you know, find a way, but those items aren't going anywhere anytime soon. This is true. They're just not going anywhere anytime soon. And some of them aren't going to cause too much of a problem. Other things might, but it's never a good idea to put stuff out into the environment that we can't, that's not going to just become a part of it and disintegrate and whatnot. So anything in the environment that's used by people is what we call a natural resource. So we have what we call renewable. And so what's example of renewable resource? Drew?
Nuclear.
Okay, Annabella?
Things that we can reuse.
That's true. What you got? Did you have one, Claire? Something else? Drew. All those right there. Yeah, those right there, huh? Yeah. So these are things that are going to replenish pretty quickly. So solar, obviously solar energy. Now here's the thing to remember about solar energy. While solar energy itself is very renewable, it's every day the sun comes up. If you've got a solar panel on the roof of your house, it's going to take more energy in. It's not like you're burning coal and then the coal will be gone tomorrow. The sun keeps coming around, right? You keep coming near it every time. The problem is those solar panels, however, are an issue. They do not do well in landfills. They can be dangerous and they can take a very long time. Same thing with wind. So wind down here at the bottom. This is the other thing to consider.
Aren't they like laser beams to birds?
Well, you get there in a second, the solar ones, yeah. But wind, right there, wind is also not without consequence. The wind turbines, you ever seen a wind turbine?
Yeah.
Seen it? Yeah.
We went to Kansas on vacation.
Yeah,
last
yeah,
summer.
your son.
I go on a lot of road trips, so whenever we were living in Chicago, we used to go.
Yeah.
to Chicago.
There's a lot
So
between
every time
Chicago and
we
the
were
South.
passing, we would
Yep.
see them.
And they'll say to a farmer, hey, you have a big old field and you're growing soybeans. Can we rent a piece of your field and pop this wind turbine in? And they're like, well, heck yeah, that's basically free money. Who wouldn't? And the place I saw the most of them, this is crazy. The most I've ever seen was when my husband and I were on vacation and we drove from Prague in the Czech Republic to Hungary in Budapest. All that way through like Slovakia and parts of Hungary was nothing but packed with wind turbines. I'm talking about beautiful countryside, centuries old villages with massive wind turbines. It was a little weird, but here's what I want to tell you about wind turbines. Those blades, they don't last forever. They have to be replaced and they end up in landfills. So even these renewable sources are not without consequence. Yes, Darcy.
I was just gonna say I've been learning about Europe
Mhm.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And what doesn't make sense in Harry Potter is that Voldemort is hiding in Albania, right?
Right.
He didn't go for Bulgaria first, which was where Durmstrang was, which would have made a
Right.
lot more sense because they're closer.
Right. Geography, people, geography. Well, I guess when you can disapparate, it doesn't matter. Maybe that's it.
And when you're in Harry Potter.
Yeah. So water, where's our closest water hydroelectric? Do you know where that is? Our closest hydroelectric dam? If you were to walk down the hill into my backyard, get in the river and walk that way, you're going to walk smack into it. You ever been? The Swanee Dam. Yep. If you've ever been across Swanee Dam Road, where you've got Lake Lanier on one side and then nothing on the other except the river. Lake Lanier's weird. We could go all day about Lake Lanier, but that is a hydroelectric dam. And living here, if it's very important to know that because they produce electricity by running water under the dam, but they don't do it constantly. There's a little flow that constantly comes out. When they have windows where they're going to run the turbines, they open the floodgates majorly and the water comes through and it turns the turbines and you end up generating electricity. But when it does that, it can change the level in our river by 2 or 3 feet and it happens over a matter of minutes. So you can be down there and it's a nice flow and then suddenly it's whoosh. So you have to know when that wall of water is coming or it could be really dangerous. It could be really dangerous because if you get caught off guard. So like our neighbors, they like to go tubing, but you have to check. You can go online and check the schedule for an opening. And he's timed it. He knows just how long it takes for the water to get from the dam to here because he tubes enough that or fishes that it's important enough for him to know.
I watched a documentary about dams and one day they actually broke the dam and there were these villages on one side of the water and after they broke the dam, the water rise by 10 feet.
Oh, I believe it.
So all the villages got flooded.
I believe it. And the other thing Drew was pointing out about solar. So there are some fields of solar panels, especially out in the Midwest, like towards the desert. They'll just have a big field and you can't grow anything there like you can in the wind turbine fields. You can cover it with solar panels because it's not like it matters if you block the sun to the ground. You're not growing a crop. And if the sun hits them right, you ever been outside where you've got, maybe you've got a watch or even not in the sun, even in the house, you got something reflective on and you see a little light bouncing around because it came off your watch or your glasses. Well, those solar panels can shoot They bounce sunbeams back up, super concentrated sunbeams, and there will be birds that fly through the air, smack right into them, and literally burn up and come flying, well, not flying, falling down to the ground.
Like in like a TV show.
Yep. So even the renewable sources are not without consequence. And keep in mind, like biomass, that would be like deforestation. It'll grow back, but it takes some time. Yes, Annabella.
I was minding my business on the TV
Uh-huh.
in my room, and I was watching YouTube, and it was a video of like the Hoover Dam,
Mm-hmm.
and the water it shoots back up instead of going down.
Oh, weird. Because there's a current of air that comes up it. Yeah.
That's cool. I've seen it.
Yes, Darcy.
You should never get solar panels until your children are over 18 because they are not ready to see a flaming bird.
Right. Wouldn't that be terrifying? Oh my goodness. You can look on YouTube. There's videos about it. So let's look at non-renewable for a minute. Okay, so your non-renewable are things like nuclear, but nuclear, even though it's not renewable because we only have but so much of the elements we use, the isotopes we use, it's still, it's efficient. A tiny amount of the isotope can produce a lot of power versus like maybe you need more coal to produce the same amount of power. So things like coal, natural gas, oil, these things, once they're gone, right? We can only pump but so much oil out of the ground. Now, natural gas has been in the news a lot lately. You may hear about fracking. Have you heard about fracking?
Yes.
So that's basically like there's pockets under the ground that are just gas. It's natural gas. It's what you burn. Like when I turn my stove on, I get flames. That's natural gas. You can harvest it by tapping down on the ground and sucking it straight out. But you can also do this thing where you think about a crazy bendy straw where you can put it down and go this way and go that way and go this way and go that way. So that's kind of what fracking is it's like, I need the natural gas that's way over there, but I'm only able to set up shop here. So I'm going to weave it all underneath and go get it from over there. And people get upset about that because obviously if you're disturbing what's below the surface, it can affect what's on top. So if you've got air in there, there's pressure, you take it out. So they have to like circulate air back in where gas comes out. And there are a few places on Earth where you can see the natural gas at the surface doing its thing. There's some, it's called what's it called? The everlasting flame or the ever burning flame. You can look it up. There are videos of it on YouTube. But there's this waterfall. This is crazy, y'all. It's a waterfall. And behind the waterfall, there is a leak of natural gas and it's lit and it burns. And it's just like fire coming out of a rock behind a waterfall. It's pretty wild. Stuff like that is really neat. So when we talk about population, all right, this is population of humans. So this is what we know of our population from 1820 to basically 2020. So 200 years or so. And this is just, I didn't mean to bump it. This is just continent by continent. Go back where I told you to go. There we go. So Asia had a lot, but look at how much has grown. And then you've got Africa, Europe, North America, Latin America, Oceania. These are like little oceans is what they're throwing in there. But Asia in particular has had the largest population for a long time and exponentially huge growth. You can see how much more, whereas Europe has stayed pretty much the same. And part of that is because Europe is pretty well contained, right? They're not spreading out everywhere. Asia has a lot of room to spread west. So that's part of it. And then their density within their cities, their number of people per certain area of land is really, really high. And if you look over here, this is the world population, not broken down by continent, but world population over the last 12,000 years.
Kind of confusing
So-
considering the fact that in certain places in Asia they'll kill babies if they're not born.
We're not going there. Not sociology class. So 4 million people in 10,000 BCE. So about 12,000 years ago, we had 4 million people. And now how many do we have? 7.7 billion. That's a lot. But if you look, where's the growth? It doesn't really shoot up until right about here. What year do you think that is? Right about here?
World War II.
Maybe.
But not World War II.
So this is 2000. This is 2000 BCE. So this would be what? What do you think this would be? We got 10,000, 8,000, 6,000, 4,000, 2,000. This is 0. Okay, so this is the last 2,000 years. Okay, so if you look, year 1,000 would be right about there, right? And then if we were going to lob that in half, year 1,500 would be right about here. But this major boom looks like it's occurring around, anybody want to guess?
There.
16, 1700 probably? Yeah. And then look at the little, do you see that dip? See this dip right here?
Yes.
That's the Black Death hitting Europe. That's what that is.
I read that.
Plague, pestilence, right?
People just shriveled up.
Yeah, for real. That's how bad it was. Bad enough to make a visible dip in a worldwide population map. That tells you something. So in the last, 500,000 to 500 years, we've had that much growth. That's huge. Yes, Annabella.
My dad told me not like the dip, but he said that it was like COVID, but worse.
Way worse. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Black Death. Very, very bad. So it's highly, highly, highly contagious, like way more than COVID contagious. And it's the kind of thing that, if you got it, they didn't know how to treat anything, right? Like now we can at least, if you get sick with something, we can at least try and treat it. Now COVID's a virus. We can't kill a virus, but what we can do is treat your symptoms. So if you're having trouble breathing, we can give you medication for that, or we can put you on a breathing machine, but that's not something they could do then. We didn't have the technology. I was gonna say, they would bleed you or put leeches on you or whatever. When I was in elementary school, I worked.
It's just draining you.
Yeah, when I was in elementary school, I worked on weekends as a tour guide at this colonial house. It's Virginia. There's colonial stuff everywhere, right? So this house was built in like the late 1600s. It was really cool. And I got to dress in period clothes and give people tours. And part of my tour was to explain what happened if you got sick. And if you got sick, their cure was to bleed you. If they couldn't find leeches, they would just cut you and catch your blood in a cut, because they believed this is in the time frame when people believed in humors. There were like 4 fluids in your body, and that was responsible for whether or not you were sick. And right, so they would bleed you, and they also gave you 3 pills made of deer dung, which is deer poop, and turpentine, which they use as a paint thinner. And I don't know why they thought that was going to fix you, but they did. Darcy.
I've been reading this history book called Horrible Histories, and there's this.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tutors, and
yeah.
they had crazy medication. One of them to cure a headache, I think, was boil a red-haired dog.
That sounds fine. Yeah, that sounds logical. So pollution. This one says pollution is often the result of human activity. What's the obvious pollution in this picture? Can you see it? What kind of pollution, Lily? What is it?
What?
Oh, did you raise your hand? I thought you were waving at me. Well, what do you see? What kind of pollution is obvious there?
Air pollution.
Air pollution. Yeah. See this beautiful countryside, and oh gosh, the city, right? And there are some places where this is visible like this. Now, the most polluted place I've ever been was China, and we went to China 7 years ago, probably, Drew. And no joke, not kidding. When we landed in Beijing, I'd been warned because we were visiting a friend who was living there, and she'd warned us. She's like, you're going to need masks. Like we all wear masks now. She's like, you're going to need it just to breathe the air here. So we're coming in, when you're flying, you can see the city and the clouds below. And it was kind of a yellow layer of cloud. I thought was odd. When we landed, out those little airplane windows was this yellowish, brownish, grayish cloud, which was essentially pollution that we flew right through. And suddenly, the air in the plane gets cycled from, at that point, some outside air is coming in and they're cycling fresh air and it's coming through filters. You could taste the air. You could taste the air in your mouth. It tasted metallic. It was disgusting. Yeah. But weeks before that, they'd had a big summit where a bunch of other nations came to talk about all kinds of fun worldwide national things. And in order to impress them, they had made all the factories in the city close for 2 weeks ahead of the visit. So when everyone from other countries visited, all these important leaders, it was beautiful, breathable air, lovely November air. And then as soon as those people left, crank them up again. Yes, Annabella.
Whenever I was in the city, because I didn't live exactly in the city in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in a town,
Like right outside, a suburb. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we train to Chicago, and it was like a pretty sunny day where we were. And
Yeah.
It was really, really dark where Chicago.
It's
was,
gross.
And then there was just a bunch of trash on the street.
It's really nasty. Yeah.
Needle.
So environmental science, that's going to be the study of how natural processes occur and how humans affect them. So to help balance different opinions on environmental issues, decision makers weigh the costs and benefits of every proposal. So if you're going to have a building, if you're going to build a building, there are people, like say you buy a piece of land here in Forsyth County, there are people who are going to tell you what you can and can't do with it as far as the environment is concerned. Like, oh, there's a creek over there, so you can't touch within 50 feet of that. And you can't grade this way because it'll cause runoff to go that way. And there's people who do that. And so they're going to weigh costs and benefits of every single proposal. The problem is, of course, when you get involved like that, you get people paying people. So decisions aren't always necessarily the best, but yes, Lewis.
One time when I was on a hiking trail with my family, I saw this sewer with oil coming out into the stream.
That's
I
disgusting.
remember that. That was yucky.
So this was in your notes. These were in your notes. So renewable resources are either always available or quickly replenished, and non-renewable resources are not easily or quickly replenished, like oil, coal. Suppose a town wants to buy a polluted marsh on an abandoned factory's land. Clean up the marsh and use it for a nature center. What are some costs and benefits of the project? Does anybody have an idea? Somebody give me one cost. Drew, what's one cost? Yeah, what's one cost of that?
One cost would be, you have to dig up all the things, you have to destroy it, you have to do all that stuff.
Okay, yeah. You have a cost?
Can I tell you a benefit?
Yeah, tell me a benefit.
It helps preserve wildlife.
There you go. That would be the idea. You would hope that it could be done correctly. It may be one of those things that becomes so expensive they can't do it correctly. So as the human population grows, we're going to produce more waste and we're going to use more resources. So forests and fisheries, let's talk for a minute about them. Now, in case you didn't know this, there is a fishery right up the river in the Chattahoochee River Club neighborhood, which is not River Club, Chattahoochee River Club. River Club's on the other side in Gwinnett County.
Yeah.
And Chattahoochee River Club is at the end of, like if you took Windermere Parkway and went all the way to the end where 20 is, that's the front of their neighborhood. In the neighborhood, in the back corner is a fishery. It's a troutery. And they grow trout and they toss them into the river, and they're for people who fish. That's the purpose of them, is to stock the river with trout. It's a neat place. You can go and visit. They have ponds. They have a whole like indoor facility. It's pretty cool.
I just finished reading a book called Boys in the Boat.
Mhm.
And one of the kids in the book got arrested
Ooh.
for fishing the wrong way in
Oh,
one of those
no.
special areas.
Oh yeah.
He was throwing a long harpoon instead of using a hook and a line.
Yep. There are
He
rules
just threw
about
the
that.
long harpoon, and if you didn't get it back and you hit the fish, it
Right.
would just be like a
Dead fish can't
flying
get out. Mhm. And there are rules everywhere about how to fish, when to fish, how big a fish you can take out. And there are also rules about how old you can be without a license. Like I think in this state, you can fish till you're 14 without a license. 16, yeah.
We actually went fishing the other day. My mom couldn't fish, but we could.
Like you guys are welcome anytime you want. If you like to fish, you're welcome to try and fish in my backyard. But I will tell you that river
Yeah,
moves so
yeah.
quickly that if you cast from the shore, you better be reeling because it's going this way. There's no way. The only way to do it well would be to take waders, go out into the water and cast downstream. That's really the only way to fish here. And I don't have waders, but like I know your grandpa does. And I have told him he's welcome to come back here anytime. So let's look at this next bit though. Hold on. So forests, because new trees can be replanted to replace old trees or dead trees or cut down trees, forests can be considered renewable resources. And they're going to produce oxygen, absorb carbon dioxide, prevent erosion, provide habitats, and provide resources to humans. You know, when they do construction on the side of the road, you ever see them throw down that stuff that looks like blue paper, all mashed up blue spitballs? That's what it looks like. That's like a nutrient rich, it is like a paper, a biodegradable material that has grass seeds in it. And the reason they plant grass there is because once those roots get in the dirt, they help prevent erosion. Forests obviously are going to do that on a grand scale. So we have clear cutting. This is when they go through and take out all the trees. And that's an example of clear cutting right there. And it pretty much left a big old scar on the land, as you can see. And then you also have selective cutting, and that's when they're going to go through and take out certain types of trees, but not all trees. You can imagine one of these is going to be more expensive than the other. Which one do you think is going to be more expensive?
Clear cutting.
Actually, it's going to be selective cutting because it's real easy to blow along and just cut down everything in your path. It's much harder to go and pick out things and then drive all around and make special roads. So that's why when they do neighborhoods around here, they clear cut almost exclusively. They very rarely go through and preserve trees. At our old house, they built a neighborhood behind us and they clear cut. And I was very sad because there was a gully in the back. And they did this not only so they can get all the trees out of the way, but so they could level it, right? But if they had used the topography, I would have been thrilled because there was this gully where all of the nutrients and water had flowed for hundreds of years. And down there was a chestnut oak tree that was so big. So, I mean, I'm talking like its trunk was like this. And I was really hoping they were going to leave that tree because it was incredible. And they mowed it right over. And we actually have pictures of our family standing on the stumps as, you know, as big as that table easily. And they just took it right down. And then lastly, sustainable yield. Okay. So this is a great example of intentional replanting. So look, I mean, look at that. That's pretty cool. So what they've done here is they've clear cut a forest for the purpose of using the lumber. And then they go back in and they replant. And in this case, they replanted in just a particular pattern that turned out to be really pretty. But yeah, but you see how easy it would be to say, okay, we want to harvest pines. They're all in one area now. It's not like you got to get pines out in the middle of everything else, huh?
Yeah, that's crazy.
About growing pines. Yep. So fisheries, we talked about that briefly. So managing fisheries for a sustainable yield includes strategies such as setting fishing limits, which we talked about, changing fishing methods, developing aquaculture techniques, and finding new resources. Limits on number and size of catch can prevent overfishing and ensure young fish survive to reproduce. So usually in areas where there's a lot of fishing, there will be signs up and it'll say like under 7 inches catch and release. So if you pull a fish up and it's too small, you're supposed to put it back because it's not old enough to have reproduced yet. And if you take out all the fish that are too young to reproduce, you're not going to have any fish.
When we went to Tennessee, we found this special fishing place.
Yeah.
And we caught about 20 fish in total, but only 2 of them were big enough.
To keep.
Take home.
Yep.
So I'm in a Girl Scout troop, so we cooked those so we could get our fishing back.
That's cool. Now there used to be right at the end of, okay, if you were to take James Burgess, which is this road out here, all the way to 20, where there's the bridge at the river, there's a little road called Ruth Lane. And there used to be a place there called Rainbow Trout Fishing Farm, and they had ponds. And the ponds were stocked, and they were all stocked with mature fish. And you could fish for fun in the ponds and catch fish. But it was not fun because there were so many fish that you would cast, reel in a fish. I mean, in 5 minutes, you had so many fish that it was going to be too expensive to leave because you had to pay for what you caught. So it's like, okay, I have run out my budget for the day. I've been here 5 minutes. That was fun. And literally there were so many of them. So if you look here, we have fishing limits. So that's what we're talking about. How many can you catch, right? And also limits on the limit things like age, like we talked about, and size. Fishing methods. This is exactly what Claire was talking about, where, you know, using a harpoon versus using a hook. There are going to be some fish that where it's dangerous to catch them with a certain type of lure because maybe it's a fish you don't want. And if you return it, now it's injured because of the type of lure you used. And then aquaculture. So aquaculture is like exactly what happens up here if you ever want to visit the troutery. They hatch the babies. It's a hatchery. They will hatch the little babies. Those are baby salmon. Aren't they cute? They will hatch the little babies, grow them, and put them out into the river for stocking it for fishing. So here's some logging methods. So you have clear cutting and selective cutting, which we talked about. And these were from your notes here. So your advantages of clear cutting is it's quicker and it's cheaper. Your disadvantages is that it completely destroys the habitat and it increases erosion. And then with selective cutting, you're going to get less damage to the environment, but it's more difficult and it's more expensive. And because of that, a lot of these companies are not going to bother with it, especially if their goal is to put in houses. So as this area continues to become more populated, you watch and see when they go to build a neighborhood, they nearly always clear cut. So biodiversity is our last bit here. I think it's our last bit. Biodiversity is the variety of life in the world or within a particular ecosystem, and it's valuable. It has an economic and an, you okay there, Drew? And an ecological value. Okay, well, So natural factors are going to affect biodiversity, like area, climate, diversity of niches. So the reason it's valuable and the reason it's important is because obviously certain species are not going to be able to survive without other species, because as you saw when we were outside last week, everything is interdependent when you get inside an ecosystem. You know, the ants need to eat the dropped, you know, I've seen ants eat poop, you know, whatever. And then there's an animal that needs to eat the ants, and it goes round and round and round, right? It's all part of the same food web. So watch this guy up here. There he is. You see that guy? All right. Keystone species. This is a species that influences the survival of other species in an ecosystem. So a really good example here is the North American beaver. Cute little, hello. It's cute, right? So your North American beaver is a keystone species because it supports the entire community. This one organism supports the entire community. So what's a keystone? There's a keystone in this picture. Does anybody see it? You know what a keystone is? This right here is a keystone. If you were building this arch with all of these stones and you took this stone out, what would happen to your arch?
The whole thing will fall.
The whole thing will fall. This one little stone is holding up everything. And if you look at ancient architecture in particular, you'll see this a lot. Now, sometimes it's just part of a facade because it looks good and we expect to see it. But in older architecture, it's absolutely essential. It's a little wedge-shaped stone, not a total wedge, but it's like this, right? So a keystone refers to a wedge-shaped block that forms the apex, that's the top, of a stone arch, and that brick holds the entire span in place. If you remove it, the whole arch collapses. So sometimes referred to as ecosystem engineers of the forest, the beaver continuously work to create new wetlands and ponds by their building of dams and lodges. And they're incredible workers with prolific builders carrying mud and stones with their forepaws and timber between their teeth to build well-maintained dams. These dams turn streams into ponds and lakes, which provide excellent areas for other animals to use and thrive. So back in the day, when Europeans first settled North America and found this North American beaver, people wanted their coats. They were in high demand. So there's a lot of beaver hunting going on. Okay, so when you hunt out all the beavers, those dams disappear. And that means those ponds disappear and become streams again. And everything in the ecosystem of that pond was dependent upon that beaver. So you lose all those species. Yes, Darcy.
I know why they're called apex predators now.
Apex predator is at the top. Correct. Apex is top. So types of biodiversity. You have ecosystem diversity. That's your whole ecosystem. What's diverse there? Species diversity. Look at all the different types of trees that produce all those different types of leaves. Those are beautiful. And then also genetic diversity. So all of these are real snails. They're not painted. And those snails, they don't live here, unfortunately, because they're gorgeous. But those snails are all the same species, but there's genetic diversity. Like if you look at us in this room, we're all the same species, but we're all genetically diverse. Do you know, real quick, because we're running through time, hang on. Do you know what denotes a species in particular, like how you can tell if two organisms are the same species? They have to be able to mate and reproduce an offspring that is capable of reproducing. For example, you ever heard of, I get them confused, a burro versus like you got donkeys and horses there's one way, I'm really bad at this. One way is a female horse and a male donkey, and the other way is a female donkey and a male horse. But the offspring that you produce, like the mule or whatever that you produce, is strong and can do all kinds of stuff, but it cannot reproduce. That animal is incapable of reproducing. It's because they're not the same species, but their chromosomes will align to the point where you can produce an offspring. So humans can reproduce fertile offspring. We're the same species. Just like dogs, you can, if you had a Chihuahua and a Great Dane, probably not possible due to size differences, but you could, would be an interesting thing, but they're the same species because they could produce offspring. So hang on, we only have like 2 minutes. So I'm going to go through the rest of these real quick. So species loss. You have threatened species. This is a threatened species of salamander here in Georgia. This means that it's getting hard to find this species. Endangered species. This is an endangered species of bat here in Georgia. This means it's getting very hard to find this species and it's hard for them to mate. And lastly, you have extinct species. This is the only non-photograph in my slideshow. And that is because this bird used to live here and no longer exists. It is now extinct, this particular species of bird. So threats to biodiversity, some human activities such as habitat destruction, habitat fragmentation, threaten biodiversity. You ever seen one of these? This is a wildlife bridge. You can find them sometimes on Google Earth or whatever. Basically, they build a bridge over a road, or sometimes they'll put a tunnel under a road for the sole purpose of allowing animals to move so you don't have their habitat fragmented.
It's actually
So
because on like in the Greenway, like it goes through the woods.
Yep.
And they did one to not disturb it around because
Mm-hmm.
you go under it. through the
So,
woods over
Other
the
threats to
bridge.
biodiversity, I'm watching our clock, is hunting. Okay, now obviously hunting can be good or bad for a species. It depends. It depends. I mean, if you've already gotten to a point where there's not enough food and they're going to starve to death, then hunting is better because at least in that case, you've reduced the population artificially. So the ones that live can actually eat. But like I said, with the beaver, that can cause real problems, right? Pollution, which we discussed before, and introducing exotic species. What's the exotic species in that picture? Do you know what that is? Can you tell? That is kudzu. Did we discuss kudzu a little bit last week? I know I talked about it in the other group. Kudzu is a Japanese vine that is not indigenous to this area, but you can't drive around the South without seeing it. They call it the vine that ate the South. And it was introduced in the World's Fair way back at the same time we were introducing light bulbs. Aren't these cool? And they said, this would be great. You can put this on your porches and it'll give you some shade and it'll stop erosion and your cows can eat it. And it took over because it has 0 natural predators here. Hang on, we need to finish real quick. Conserving biodiversity. Look at this biodiversity in the picture. You got moss, you got mushrooms. It's really cool. So various measures can be taken to conserve biodiversity. And they might include preventing deforestation, efficient use of resources, and also picking out what we call ecological hotspots. So a good example of that is going to be wetlands. That's where you have a lot of ecological diversity. Breeding programs. So some are captive breeding programs. We have captive breeding programs. And we have captive wolf breeding programs, actually, where we will catch a couple wolves, let them breed, release their young into the wild, and that helps, bolster a population so we get more. And then another one, that's my favorite picture from the whole slideshow, is supporting local laws and treaties. So sometimes you'll get local laws that say, hey, we don't want to destroy any more of this particular type of habitat because we're losing the cute little dormice, this little guy that live there. So you have to be aware of those opportunities because sometimes they'll pop up. So you want to get a piece of paper out because just in a second, I'm going to tell you what's on your test. So be sure you have paper and pencil out. So area, climate, and niche diversity affect the diversity of an ecosystem. Coral reefs provide many niches. This is from your notes. A species with diverse gene pool is better equipped to adapt to a changing environment. Endangered Species Act of 1973 protected things like this Aleutian Canada goose, greenback cutthroat turtle, Pacific gray whale. These are all from your notes. And laws and treaties, captive breeding programs, and habitat preservation can all help prevent species extinction. Of course, you may always take a picture of this. And I will include it in your weekly email. Here are your study topics for your Unit 2 Ecology exam. They are biomes, population, consumers, producers, and decomposers, carnivore, herbivore, and omnivore, weather versus climate, your biome, where do you live, know which one you live in, population limiting factors, succession, pioneer species, relationships between organisms, biodiversity, renewable and non-renewable resources. I'll go back, didn't mean to bump it up. So this is what, and I will put this in your weekly email like I do, but that right there is what you need for studying for your test. All right, so what you want to do is get out your lab for this week and a pencil and come on down. And I'm going to switch this screen over. So
You can keep them. I have 100 of them on it.
Oh, like that case. Like this amount of cases. Okay.
and